Welcome to the Green Room, your backstage pass to the world of surfing. I'm your host, surf MC and commentator Terry Tappa, diving into epic wins, crushing fails and wild stories with surfing's biggest names, as well as the legends working behind the scenes to keep that stoke alive. A big shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the Official Beer Co. with their new GC Lager. So wax up, paddle out and join us in the Green Room, where the surf chat never goes flat. G'day folks, welcome to the Green Room. Today's guest is what I believe a true legend in surfing. A top-class surfer, shaper, photographer, author, artist, a true pioneer in the surfing world. Over the years, this man's reputation has been as a purist and innovator to surfing, whether it be shaping or anything to do with the pure art, which is surfing. I got to talk to Richard properly the first time probably at the 50th anniversary of the Par Bender, which Richard was the inaugural winner against a field of the world's best surfers. After that, I knew we had a lot more to talk about. It's a pleasure to welcome to the Green Room, Richard Harvey.
Thanks very much, Tap. Nice to be here.
Mate, such a pleasure to have you here. And, mate, I'm actually I've got to say, I don't know everything you've done because there's so much you've done over, 78 years now?
Yes, that's right.
78 years, that's amazing. But where did it all start? I believe you moved to Avalon, but where were you born and that sort of thing?
I was a country kid. I was born in a little town up near Tamworth called Manila.
Oh, yeah, Manila, yeah.
And we used to come down to the beach for holidays, and we'd go down to places like Nambucca Heads and places like that. And I was always a bit hesitant about the surf. I liked the pool, but I didn't like the frothy stuff of the surf. And by the time then I'd moved back down to Avalon and into the city, I started to ride a surfer plane and sort of got the feel of the surf, and that's pretty much where it all began.
And do you remember the first wave that got you hooked on surfing? Because I know for me it was at the pass when I was about 10. Dad pushed us on a wave, and after that, that's all I wanted to do was surf.
I had a funny experience because my sister was a surfer before me, and she was one of those girls that they'd ride tandem, one in front and one on their knees and one standing up behind and that type of thing. And then one of the guys had an epoxy board which had a polystyrene core in it, and he used to allow me to ride it every now and then because I was the kid brother of the one of the girls that surfed. Anyway, this particular board, the inside of it had come away from the outside, and water had got it to the inside of it, and when you turn the board, there was like a delayed reaction where the water had run down the board and then the board would sort of take off. And I was surfing in a little spot down in Mona Vale called the Basin, and I'd paddled onto this wave. And at that time, everyone was going straight. So it wasn't like one man on a wave. There was always two or three people on a wave, which was fine because we're all going into one direction. But anyway, what ended up happening was the water ended up rushing across the board, and I ended up doing a go-behind on one of these waves with one of the other surfers, and everybody was quite amazed that, and that's probably one of the very first waves that I really remember riding. It was only about 2 foot. And
what year would that have been, mate?
Oh, that would have been about 60, I guess.
Oh, wow.
60.
That's the surfing craze was really hitting in Australia, I suppose, then, was it? Or?
Well, Gidget was a popular movie, which was sort of more a general public type of a movie. And then the surfing thing really sort of happened in about 56 when the American lifeguards came over with the Olympic Games, Greg Knoll and Tom Zahn. They brought balsa boards over with them, and they were shorter because everybody had been riding these big, long 16-foot toothpick type things.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody could ride those.
Well, I look at the old movies and I've just gone, that's a real skill to ride those things. And so when that balsa board thing happened, which is where I sort of came in at the beginning of, probably at the end of the balsa era, because foam came in about 60. And so I started on a balsa board and then ended up going on to foam after that.
And so from there at Avalon, mate, did you start to go in contests and all that straight away, or were you any clubs or anything, or did you was just surfing at the beach? That was...
I had a funny little story, and what it was that I bought my first foam surfboard from a guy who was one of the really hot surfers, a guy called Peter Hughes, and he was the number one surfer at Mona Vale at the time. And because Mona Vale was a long way from Brookvale, it wasn't like you could just take your board to a surf shop and get it fixed. You had to go into Brookvale, get a can of resin and some promoter and catalyst and fiberglass and come back. So this particular board ended up having a bit of a ding in the nose, which I'd ended up cutting off and putting tape over it and all of that. So I ended up eventually, it just started to rot and make a real mess of it. So I ended up cutting about 1 foot off the front of the surfboard, straight across with a big old rusty saw. And I went, oh, that doesn't look too good. So I cut some corners on it. And then I got some fiberglass, laid it over the top. And the guy told me at the surf shop, he said, oh, look, this purple stuff's called promoter, and you put it into the resin to make it go off a bit quicker when it's cold. So I went, oh, okay, pouring a bit of promoter. This whole thing, fiberglass, turned purple. The pot on the beach at home where I was fixing it, all started to smoke and carry on. But the board ended up being an 8-footer. And so what ended up happening, because I'd cut 1 foot off the front, the board was really easy to turn. Ugly looking surfboard, but it was really easy to turn. And so I went in the state titles and ended up coming third in the New South Wales titles.
On a board with a cut-off nose that you'd put back together yourself.
It wasn't even put back. It was just basically cut straight across. Yeah. And I'd only been surfing about 3 years, so that was sort of not too bad. And that was held at Avalon, and I remember it out in the final, and Nat was in the juniors, and Nat and I are sitting on this big peak out the back, and there was a right down one side and a left down the other, and the right-hander ran into the corner and the left sort of ran back down on the beach. So we're sitting out there together, and this really nice peak's come through, and I've turned around to Nat and I've gone, which way are you going? And he's gone, both.
That doesn't sound like Nat much, does it?
He did these big S-turns all the way across the peak and eventually went right, and I eventually got my left-hander after he'd gone. But that was sort of my first real contest experience, and I really enjoyed it. It pushes you a little bit.
Well, that's it, mate. And I believe you became quite a well-known surfer pretty quickly because, how old were you when you're surfing that one when you got third?
Oh, probably about 13 or 14.
13 or 14. So, where I was going to is quite a few years on from that. So you must have had a few more contests after that because, you end up getting paid.
Well, there was a range of little things that sort of went on. The contest used to be on the north side at Avalon or Manly or on the south side down at Bondi, and one of the state titles we went down there to Bondi, and that was the year that Kevin Brennan won the juniors and the seniors. It was about 1 to 2 foot high. He's a little tiny guy.
Yeah, Kevin the head.
And he's a really good surfer, but the waves were so small and it was his home break that he beat everybody in all the different contests. And that was one of the contests that I went in. So I'd sort of done okay, and then we got to about 67, I suppose, and they had one over at Maroubra, and I was doing some different types of manoeuvres. I was doing backhand re-entries and things where they weren't really doing any of that type of stuff at the time. And then I'd been working in the film industry. That was one of my jobs, being a film editor. And a mate of mine came up to me one day and he said, Ron Wade wants to offer you a sponsorship. And I went, oh yeah, what's that about? And he said, well, he wants you to ride his boards. And I sort of went, yeah, okay. And I'd been riding Scott Dillon's and McTavish shapes and things like that at the time, Wallace, and I didn't do anything about it. And then he came back to me and he said, oh, look, what I'll do is I'll give you $15 or 15, I think it was dollars at the time, $15 a week, and I'll give you
that's a fair bit of coin back then.
It was a lot of money, and he said, I'll give you an old Holden Ute that's painted orange with big Ron Wade right down the side, and you can drive it wherever you want, and I'll pay all the fuel. And I was at his doorstep the next day.
I bet you were,
I'm in. And so that was my first real professional thing. And so Bandy and I used to travel up and down the coast and just go surfing everywhere.
Mate, just to bring you back, the backhand re-entry, what, like you said, no one was doing. What made you to actually do that manoeuvre? What inspired you to do that backhand re-entry?
When you're riding longboards, the hardest thing is when you're in a hollow wave is to sort of straighten out.
Yeah.
So one of the easiest things to do was to go up higher and let the wave break and let the white water sort of fall down and then ride it down that way. And so I'd been doing that a little bit, riding hollow waves and just finding that backhand it was easier rather than sort of straightening out. So at the end of the wave I'd sort of go up and ride up onto the white water up on the top and then sort of come back down. And even, people that commentators and things like that weren't judging said that the judges didn't understand what was going on. It was something that sort of hadn't happened.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of little things, and then after that I sort of went, I don't want to go in contests anymore. But then the 69 came up and they were going to Western Australia, and my mum said, well, you can have a trip to Western Australia for your 21st birthday or you can have a party, whatever you want. So I went Western Australia. So that was the one that Nat won. Peter Druin came second and I got a third in 69. And then after that I decided I'm going to retire after that.
Retire.
So that was sort of basically the end of my surfing career or my professional contest side of things.
Yeah.
And then in 73, I came up to Queensland sort of permanently about 1970, and then they said, we're going to hold the Australian titles back in Western Australia again. And I went, oh, gee, I really like those waves over there, big left-handers. Yeah. It was sort of like a Sunset Beach reverse type of
and
a
you
thing.
being a goofy foot, of course.
Yeah, that's right. And I really liked the wave. And by that time, Midget and Druin and those guys had sort of, stopped surfing. And there was a new generation of surfers coming through, like Michael Peterson and Rabbit and PT and all of that crowd. So I had to go into Queensland titles to qualify, which I ended up doing, and then going over to Western Australia and Rabbit and PT and I drove over there, in a souped up Cortina station wagon.
That would have been a little adventure on its own, mate.
Oh, that was. There were some stories in that one, that's for sure. That was the only time in Michael's little run of contest things where he got beaten.
And by you.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things that sort of contributed to it. One was that we drove via Bells Beach at Easter before we went over to Western Australia, and one of the things happened is we built these really long, sleek pintails to ride Burley because Burley had these long point hollow waves. Yeah. So we're building sleeker boards to go faster and faster down the line. And I built this really fine, thin thing. It was all painted silver, and it was just like my pride and joy. I was going to take it over to Western Australia, and that was a bit of a trip. And took it out of Winky Pop in about an 8-foot day, and got pushed through the middle of it, and so I broke my board in half. And I only had one board, so I went round to the Rip Curl factory, and they went, you can build one of these, build one here. So I ended up building this big, thick, chunky monster of a board, which was perfect for Margaret River because I could sit 20 feet outside everybody else and get every set wave. So I had the right equipment, and the judging system had changed a bit too. So Michael, who was very fast in the water, was doing winning a lot of contests because he was doing a lot of manoeuvres and getting points for manoeuvres.
Yeah.
But the Australian title was held on a different system where the judges had set up and going, okay, that's a good wave, we'll give you 8 out of 10.
More like what the system is today.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the system was a little bit different too. So having the right equipment, being familiar with the waves, and just a bit of contest knowledge and stuff behind me, it ended up winning a title, which was pretty good at the time.
Yeah, an Aussie title. Well, that was a very big thing. It's a bit different today. Unfortunately, it's not held in as much high regard, the Australian title now, the Open title, which is a shame.
Well, there was no other level. It wasn't until PT and RAB sort of started the professional thing a few years after that. By that time, I'd gone, no, the Australian title and the Par Bendel, that was the it. I've just, done all right out of that.
Well, it's not long after that Par Bendel, mate, that, like, winning the inaugural Par Bendel, it's still held in such high regard, that event, even though, I tell you what, folks, Richard won $1,500. This year's prize money was $1,500, but it was worth a bit more then. But how was that contest, mate? Because I heard it got called off as well, because the big cyclone was in 74, wasn't it?
That's right. We were at Burleigh, and we decided to go up to the Par Bendel, and all the roads started to get flooded. And I went, we'll see if we can get through before all the roads got closed. So we've got the last road out of the Gold Coast, which was sort of up near Southport and up onto the highway, driven up to Brisbane. All of Brisbane showground near the hospital was like probably under about 30 foot of water.
Wow.
So we've come all around the ridges, gone over that old Redgate Bridge, and the waves were hitting the edge of the bridge and washing over the top of the bridge, and we've just kept on going and kept on going. We got up to...
Everybody must have thought you were mad.
Well, I had a can of WD-40, and it would just spray the engine and drive for, 20 kilometres to get out and spray the engine again. And we ended up getting up there, and we got to Caloundra, and they went, no one can get through, so we're going to call the contest off. So we've gone, what are we going to do? The eye of the cyclone was sitting right over Noosa. So Noosa was absolutely blue sky, 6-foot waves. Nobody could get through. There was a bunch of probably 4 or 5 good surfers that were there. There was Keith Paul, Lopez, Terry Fitzgerald, myself, and a couple of local guys. And we had Noosa to ourselves.
What, with how many people?
With about 4 or 5 of us in the water.
And what, about 6 to 8 or bigger?
Probably Tea Tree was about 4 to 5 foot, but like just perfect. Just perfect waves. And then the contest was held the next weekend, and everybody arrived. And by that time, the cyclone swell had sort of gone through, and it was dribbling in at probably about, 2 to 3 foot at Moffat's. Prior to that surfing contest, I went down to a guy at Tugun, and he was a hypnotist, and I said, I want to highlight or want to sort of perform at a higher level than what I could, what I was doing. And so he said, I'll hypnotise you. Anyway, I went, okay. So I went out in the contest in the heat. It might have been a quarter or something like that. I ended up taking off on a couple of waves, riding them through, and came in, and they went, you've been eliminated. And I went, but I got my 3 waves. And they went, the judges have only got you down for 2 waves. And I said, well, look, there's a couple of the judges' sheets have got me down for 3 waves. So these guys have missed my other waves. So what they did, they assessed the average of those things, gave me that thing, and then I got through and went right through and ended up winning the final and winning the prize money.
And you had a young bloke in the final with you that I've had on here on the green room, Guy Omerod. How old was Guy then? He would only have been a baby, wouldn't he?
I think he was about 12 or 13 or something like that. He's terrific. Guy and I have travelled a lot together, and we've done bells together. We've done the Par Bendel together. We've been in the Mentawis together. And we've had a pretty sort of parallel type of a life. He's been a good young kid, and I suppose I took him under my wing a little bit with surfing, but he was just a competent surfer, a good kid, and I mean there was a couple of goofy footers like Doris and Guy, in Burleigh, and we were sort of like a little bit of a clique, and even the Burleigh the surf company used to say, Doris and Guy and I, we're the left wing of the surf company. And I went, yeah, that's probably pretty much it.
Yeah, well, there's always been the thing about Burleigh, about the best goofy footer at the point too. Like, when AB and all that, there's always someone who's the goofy footer at the moment. It's a sort of, I don't know, flavour of the month kind of thing, or but flavour of the year sometimes.
And it's interesting because with the time that I've been surfing, I've probably been surfing over 60 years, I've seen a whole bunch of different generations of surfing come through, and every generation has had its surf stars, just like they've had their own music. And, when you go through from the times of, when I was a kid, there was Midget, and then there was Nat, and then Nat sort of pulled out a little bit. And then I was in a gap in there for a bit, and then there was Michael and Rab and PT, and then there was the Mick Fanning and Parko. So every generation has had its group of hot shots.
Well, speaking of hot shots, mate, that Pa Bendel in '74, that was a red-hot contest. The surfers in there, of course, Jerry Lopez was in it, but Rabbit and you probably know the names more than I do that were in it, but it wasn't just like an easy field, it was an international field.
It was, and at that time, because there was no real professional circuit, the Australian title and the Pa Bendel, which was the richest contest held in Australia, or actually in the world at that time, that was sort of like the epitome, the high part of professional surfing.
Now, we said $1,500 was the first prize. This is a great story. I've discussed this with Richard before. What did you do with the $1,500? And people, this will equate to how much that money was worth.
Well, I came back with the money and I put a deposit on a house down in Albion Avenue just near the golf course where the Burleigh Golf Club is. And the block of land was $1,000 and the brand new 2-bedroom brick house was $9,000. And I went, okay, I'll put the money down on that. And so, I ended up getting into the house. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, I was driving past and there was a guy outside the house. So I pulled over and I said, how you going?
Yeah.
I bought this house back in 1974. And he went, oh, wow, is that, we talked a bit about it. And he said, how's it? I asked him how it's going. And he said, it's going pretty good. And I said, do you live in it? And he said, no, I rent it. I get about $1,000 a week for it now. And,
$1,000 a week.
And I said, what's it worth? He said, about $1.3 million. And I went, $1.3 million. That equates to probably about $130,000 in terms of what my prize money was worth at that time.
Well, because you imagine you had a surfing contest now with $130,000 first prize.
You get people from all over the world coming to
exactly, and that's what happened at the Pa. Yeah. Now, mate, before you were saying, like, when you had your little sponsorship and that, you and Batty were coming up and down the coast everywhere. What was it like travelling in the early '60s up and down looking for waves?
Well, it was empty. It was we'd pull into places, and Batty and I'd be the only surfers there, and we had times we'd go around with photographers and we'd go into places like Yagan and there'd be just Keith Paul, Batty and myself and maybe a couple of other surfers, and we were always surfing by ourselves. My very first real surf trip to Queensland, although I came up in about 63, was probably about 65, and I came up with a mate of mine called Barry Stark, and Barry was a kneeboard rider from Collaroy, and he said, I'm going to take you surfing into Queensland. And I went, yep, okay. I didn't know too much about it other than it was just, tropical water. So we've driven up, pulled in at Greenmount, and I've looked at the colour of the water and I just gone, I've got to go surfing. And he's gone, no, this is no good here. Anyway, and we'd driven up to Burleigh, and I've looked at Burleigh and I've got to go surfing here. Look how clear the water is. And it was all longboards, and so there was like 2 or 3 guys on every wave coming through, and I went out, got dropped in about 3 or 4 times and came in a bit frustrated. And he went, no, I told you so, this is no place to go surfing. And so he said, we're going further up to coast. And I went, okay. We ended up getting up to Noosa in 1965 when there was Algie Grudd, Bob McTavish and a few others, and we surfed First Point for a week and I could see out Johnson's and National sort of out the back at the end of the point, but with a big, long, heavy surfboard, you didn't really go anywhere.
And it was all rocks there too. If you fell off, probably.
Well, the first point was sort of just nice and sandy, and then we surfed there for a week, and then the wind turned on shore, and I went, I'll go for a walk and have a look and see what's out the back. And I didn't even know tea tree in those places even existed. All we did was just surf first point.
Yeah.
So that was one of my experiences with, travelling with Baddie, although we had a funny one. One of our funny trips was, and I write a few of these stories down so people can remember them. You've got
some great books here too that you've written,
Anyway, we've called into Crescent on our way up through to Queensland, and as we've called in, Crescent was known that at certain times of the year, the headland or the hill up on top of the headland came out in mushrooms. So all the people from Kempsey used to come out, pick all the mushrooms, and go back and, normal mushrooms.
Yeah. Oh, normal mushrooms,
normal
all right.
mushrooms. But this one particular year, it came out with magic mushrooms on the side of the hill, and they had ambulances coming in and out, picking people up from Crescent, taking them back into Kempsey. These poor country people, didn't know what it.
Someone must have sprinkled some spores up there.
Well, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was something that the cows eat, because it was always in the, the cow patties that these things would grow up. So Baddie and I have just grabbed a whole pile of them, stuck them in some plastic bags, and driven to Queensland, watching the coloured lights and the music going on at the same time. We had some pretty funny trips.
Oh, mate, that's amazing. And discovering those waves all the way up too. There would have been many waves that probably hardly anyone would have surfed.
Well, we knew a few places, but some spots we'd just drive in and you're going, any surf here? No, drive up to another place, any surf here? Yep. Yeah. Oh, look, that's a good point. And it can still happen now, you just pull in somewhere and the sand changes, and I've had that happen a few times.
Now, mate, like you said, when did you start making surfboards? Because behind you there we've got a beautiful chambered timber board that you've made. It's even got the Harvey logo in timber. When did you first start getting into making surfboards?
My first sponsorship was with Ronnie Wade, and the days when there wasn't any surf, I'd come into Ron and go, I want to do something. And he'd going, oh, okay, I'll teach you how to cut plan shapes. So my first sort of 3 or 4 months, the blanks were really big at the time because boards were starting to drop down in size, but the blanks hadn't changed. They were big, thick mal blanks, so we had to cut them down a fair bit. And so I'd learned to cut plan shapes, and I got pretty good at, cutting plan shapes, And then he went, okay, now I'm going to put you on the planer. So we didn't have the nice little planers that they use these days. We had the big, heavy carpenter's planers because most of the manufacturers were all chippies. Yeah. That's where they came out of that industry of building plywood boards and then balsa. Then when foam came in, it was it was the same sort of tools. So I learned to use one of these giant big planes.
Would have been big on the back. Would have been hard work.
Well, it was good. So that's where I started. But to fill you in on another little story that happened, that Keith, Paul and I were driving up to Noosa on a trip, and we've called into Mount Timbragargan, which is sort of part of the magic, not the Magic Mountains, the what do they call those mountains up at near back of Nambour?
Oh, right, the Glasshouse Mountains.
Glasshouse Mountains, they're the ones.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've called into this little place to get, some breakfast, and these two cowboys have started to give us a hard time. I use surfy wimps,
long haired, bet you would have long hair.
And all of that, and they sort
bloody
of
hippies.
And they started giving the girls a bit of a hard time. So I said to one of them, okay, well, you think you're so tough, I'll give you an arm wrestle. And they went, okay. So we've got up on the table and gone, you ready? Put my arm up there, and he looked at me and I've gone, pushed his hand down like that, and he he's looked at me and a bit sort of shocked, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, you weren't ready, were you? Okay, let's go. We'll go again. You ready?" Yeah, and he's gone, "Yep." I've banged down. What he didn't know, that I'd been picking up one of these giant big planers for about, 5 years.
Well, they're about 10 pounds or something.
Oh, they were heavy. Really big, heavy things, and you pick them up. And now the planers are like little tiny things, and they feel like they're toys.
Yeah.
Interesting learning how to shape there. And then Shane asked me if I wanted to go and surf for his team. He had a more professional sort of team. So I ended up, working with
Shane Stedman?
Shane
Stedman.
Stedman.
Yeah.
And then Shane went, "I want to open up a shop on the Gold Coast." And I put my hand up and I went,
"Get me to the Goldie."
Yeah. So that was my introduction. And then just coming across all different sorts of people. I mean, I travelled a bit then. I, travelled and sort of hung out with the Campbell brothers, the Bonza guys in California, and travelled in France, met some guys that had access to really good balsa in France, and Nat and I built some balsa boards over in France. So I learned a bit about, building timber boards. So everywhere I've gone, I've picked up, little bits and pieces. So I wouldn't say that I've learned it all by myself. I've just, it's been a teamwork of, people.
Well, my old man used to say, if you stop learning, you stop living. So you got to keep learning every day.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you basically, once from Shane, when did you start doing your own label, like the Harvey label?
When I won the Australian title, we changed the label from Shane over to Dick Harvey Surfboards, and from that time it went on. And then I came back and worked with Dick Van for 2 or 3 years. We had the Burley Surf Company.
Oh, that was like, I remember back when I was a kid, that was like when I first started surfing, the Burley Surf Co. and that. Well, it's where McDonald's is now. If you ever go to the Gold Coast, around Burley,
that's exactly right.
It was there, and that iconic picture of like Paul de Piver. Yeah, the Burley. There it is.
There you go. There's a present for you. Some coasters,
mate. Unreal. Like this, the Burley Head Surf Co.
That's
and
it.
Like that iconic photo with there was like Thornton, Paul de Piver, Dave McDougall, Dwayne Harris, Peter Harris, I think Glenn Harris,
Doris,
Doris.
Yeah.
That was the sort of hub of surfing on the northern end of the Gold Coast, really.
It was. And we used to get all those people that had come in, like Michael Ho from Hawaii, and he'd get boards, and Dick was very experimental.
Yeah.
He'd build boards and drill them all out and fill them with ping pong balls and all sorts of things. And one of the funny things with the ping pong ball is the board busted in half at Kirra one day, and there were ping pong balls all over Kirra Point. So it was good though. And Dick's still experimenting with stuff. He's a creative person.
Yeah, very creative. I remember seeing a movie of him when he came up from Sydney. That in a '60s movie. It's quite an amazing movie where they're just going into shops and stuff, and like they're just living kind of hand to mouth, and surfing.
That's what it was. And you just went, well, all I need is enough to go, have a feed so I can go surfing. And that was the whole thing of it. Our whole goal was just to surf and just keep surfing.
Yeah, that is. It's like, that's like my friend said. It's just kind of hard to sort of recreate that because, like, money was kind of plentiful in the '60s, sort of thing. Like the economy, there was money around, and it wasn't so tight on things,
Well, there was a lot of freedom. So we used to come in and shape at night, glass at night, and then surf all day and then go back and shape again at night. And some of the funny things that happened, there was a guy there was a glasser called Frankie Veal. And Frank used to play around with some psychedelics and things like that. And we came in one morning and here's Frank had been glassing all night and he'd fallen over, and whether he'd fallen asleep or in his drug-induced stupor, I don't know, but he was resin to the floor and couldn't get up off of the floor.
You come in, he's going to help me.
We had to cut him off cut his hair and cut him off the floor. So it was pretty funny, but
probably not for him.
Well, and they had funny things written on the wall. Dick had all these little sayings, like the Arty Farty Party Company, and one of them that I really liked was the cows will come and the cows will go, but the bull goes on forever.
That probably was right there too. Mate, of all, like you would have shaped for many surfers, who was your favourite surfer to shape for?
Well, there's a few guys that I really enjoyed shaping. In the longboard era, Ray Gleave, Ray was really particular about what he wanted with his boards, with the edges and the weight and distance of concaves, and how we used to have these little round dish concaves under the nose, but then we developed the flow-through concave because he'd always put his foot on the edge of the dish and get a little bit of a wobble. So we used to fine-tune things. So Ray was one of the
amazing longboarder. I've seen Ray surf back. Yeah, he's an amazing surfer.
Yeah, and then there was Hodgie, Big Bird. I mean, Big Bird 6'6", and he can do a roundhouse cutback on a 4-foot wave that just comes back and bounces vertical into the white water, and he was really good.
And I believe nobody took off deeper at the alley than him either.
Oh, around the back of the rock, way around the back. And then I shaped boards for, all different sorts of people. There was a young guy who I still shape boards for called Misha, who surfs up at Broadbeach at the moment. And he's about, he'd be 60-something now, still riding 5/8, little rounded pintails, but smooth and sweeping. And he'd get the right rail shape and the right bottom rockers, and we'd tweak the little tiny things. Because what happens with surfboards, and it's being lost a little bit, is that body inertia and wave size creates pressure of the board on the water. The faster you go, so the dynamics get magnified. And what happens is that the small things in design are being lost because the computers are just going, we'll cut from here to there, and forget all the different parts of a board are reliant on doing different things, like the flat under your chest needs to be flat so when you paddle in it planes, and then rocker in the tail so you can come off the top, and nose rocker in the front, all different little bits and pieces that go in. There's probably about 60 little bits that go into building a board. So some people had come in and you'd tweak a board just for them for one particular thing, and you'd make an improvement in their surfing. So I enjoyed building boards for everybody. And that's one of my things now, that I like to teach people how to do all of those things with my workshops, teach them the finer things and the detail that makes the difference between, one board and another board. And I tell them, I just go, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is just a little extra. It's all the little tiny things that are magnified under pressure that give you a good board or a great board. And you get feedback from every board that you build of people that come in and go, I want this, I want that. And I'm going, what's the strengths in your surfing? What's the weaknesses? And then you can go, okay, well, how about we boost this bit and we give you a bit more freedom in this bit? So then there's an evolution of design, just like there's been the evolution from balsa through to foam and longboards and pintails, and then, right down to where we are now with, concaves and different materials and things.
I've seen some boards on the weekend. It actually had a flat bottom, one of these, what were they? Sharp Eye. And actually had a flat bottom. And this guy said it goes good. And I thought, well, I don't think I've seen a flat bottom since, I don't know when.
I think probably the 70s, when we started moving into V's and concaves and things.
Yeah, and this had a flat bottom. Evidently, this guy went really good. Just I looked at it and I was going, wow, I haven't seen anything like that before. But mate, going back there, like you make all sorts of boards. What do you think of the retro movement and like mid-lengths and how everyone's going there? It's like each different strokes for different folks sort of thing, really.
It is, and one of the best things that you can do is have a a quiver of surfboards, especially on the Gold Coast. We have everything from 1 foot green mount that'll be running for 200 metres down to 8 to 10 foot Kira that's just piping, and everything in between, beach breaks. And when you get specific in your design, each design works better in particular waves. So if you're looking for a board to ride in really big waves, obviously you could paddle out at Waimea Bay on a fish, but it wouldn't be very effective. So the idea then is to be building boards that work in different conditions. So length gives you run, width gives you stability, thickness gives you buoyancy, and there's all these different combinations that you can put together. A bit more area up in the front creates more lift in the front, which means then you've got to stand further forward, which gives you a trim speed, which suits certain types of boards like fishers or pintails, that might be weight and buoyancy further forward. And then you've got the performance thruster where the weight and the buoyancy is back underneath the feet where you don't move your feet. So every little design has its benefit. So then by working out the waves that the person wants to ride, the ability of the person, their strengths and weaknesses, then you build this piece of equipment that sits in the middle. And then when you build that piece of equipment that suits both the rider and the wave that they want to ride, the board basically just disappears and it allows the person to be a surfer riding a wave rather than someone riding a surfboard.
So they're one with the wave, in other words.
Well, there's two types of surfers. There's people that are board riders that stand on a board and ride in on the white water, and then there's surfers. And surfers are the ones that feel the energy of the wave. And there's some things in surfing where you can really pick energy in different parts of the wave. One of them in particular that I really enjoy surfing and always have is that point where you get right up in the top of the lip where the water is running right up the face of the wave, and then it becomes stationary. Even though the wave's running, that part of the wave, the water becomes stationary because it's the point where it runs up the face and then it stops before it goes the opposite direction. So there's one part that runs over, another part that goes over with the lip, and then there's that little point that sits up in the top in there where the water is stationary and everything becomes really still. And then you get up into that little zone up in the top in there, and it's like the world stands still up in there. It's just a special little thing that you can get every now and then. And every now and then I'm not surfing that much anymore. I'm,
Still going good for 78 if you're still surfing, mate.
Well, I paddle out, and not very successfully, but have a bit of a play in the water. And whether I'm just sitting on the boat enjoying the rhythm, or whether I'm sitting on a board, it doesn't make a lot of difference to me these days. But finding that little spot in a wave and finding the spot for every surfer with the style that they like and the moods that they like and the waves they want to ride, that's where shaping's taken me from all my knowledge and my experience is putting it into those boards so everybody else can get out of it what I got out of it.
And so you're giving back now, but I know a while ago you stepped away from your factory and went, okay, I'm not shaping anymore. I don't know how long that lasted. I don't think it lasted very long. But you're still putting out a few boards?
I'm not building a lot. I'm probably building, maybe a couple of months these days.
Still not too bad.
Yeah, and I enjoy glassing. I enjoy shaping. I enjoy doing the workshops. I do a workshop probably one a week, which is 10 hours. So I'm in there a couple of hours each day.
And how if someone wanted to go to a workshop with you, how do they do that, mate?
Well, first of all, they'd book a time. So we run it over a week, and then we do 2 hours each day. And the first session's all about learning about templates and foam blanks and how it all sort of fits together, how the shaping bay works. And then the second thing's all about cutting plan shapes. Then the third day is all about using the planer. So we don't use any computer cuts.
Yeah.
And then the next 2 days are sort of finishing it off. So if somebody wants to do it, they basically go online and then they can email me and just go, oh, look, I'm interested in doing a workshop, or a girl goes, oh, I want to give my hubby something special.
That's pretty cool. That's a cool present. That's like it's something that's forever.
Well, people get their first board and they shape it, and shaping your own board is, and I have it on my little brochures and things like that. I go, shaping your own board is the next best thing to surfing, because it's something you get on.
And then you hop on it and feel it, what you've done.
And it's not only feeling it, but there's certain things in shaping where, and you'd know that, and surfers do this all the time, they pick a board up under their arm and they bounce it and they feel it and they go, that feels good. But a lot of people don't realise, but the distance from your wrist to your inside elbow is the size of your foot. So there's a relationship in the body sizing that when you pick a board up, and Jeff Hackman told me years ago, he said, when you put your hand on the rail, nice and soft, it should fit your hand nice and soft in your hand. And that is the rail that works for that person. So there's a relationship between the body and the board they ride, and the closer you can match that to the person that's riding it, to match that board to them, then it's like when you go and buy clothes, you buy clothes to fit. You buy clothes for the occasion, you buy a T-shirt to hang out in, or you'll buy a suit to go to a wedding or whatever it is that you're going to do, but they've all got to fit. And it's the same thing with surfboards, that we build surfboards that have got to fit. They've got to fit the rider, they've got to fit the waves, and the better they fit, the less you think about it. You haven't thought about your T-shirts or any of the clothes you're wearing because they all fit you and you're comfortable in them. And it's the same with surfboards. If you build a surfboard that fits, then it just disappears and a person becomes a wave rider, a surfer, because they're not riding a board anymore, they're riding a wave, and it's their connection to that thing that. And this is what I try to get across to people. Some people just go, fantastic, I've shaped a surfboard, I'm excited about it.
But you're trying to get the actual theory and the actual thing into them to so they sort of accept it.
Well, I try to give them the understanding of why surfing is addictive. Yeah. You know, once you're a surfer in your life, you're a surfer forever.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's something that gets a hold of you. And even, you know, whether you're young or old, it's still, you're a surfer, and that's how it is.
Mate, you've been many places, and I've got one of your books here now. What about Bali? Like, this is one of his books here, Bali, 74, 75. It's all your own photography and that, but I believe there's a picture of you here on a massive wave. I think it's at Uluwatu, is that correct?
Uluwatu, yeah. Well,
how was Bali back then?
Well, Rabbit and I paddled out in 74 in Uluwatu. We jumped off the bamboo ladder into a cave full of water that was surging right up into the end of the cave and let it carry us out. Got out to the back, and there were probably 15 to 18 foot waves coming through quite a bit, and some even bigger. So Rab and I would sit off to the side, way out off the reef, outside corner and further out, and then we'd wait until it had settled down a little bit, and then we'd paddle in closer to the bank and try to catch a wave, and then we'd sort of zoom back out if we didn't get anything. And, you know, we probably caught about 2 or 3 waves each. One of that really big wave that I caught there, it was really spooky because the swell was so long that it ran around and disappeared into the salt mist, and you couldn't see.
I couldn't see where the wave was going.
Couldn't see the end of the wave. It was just salt mist, and so I went, well, I've got to get back into the cave. I can paddle way back up onto the inside of the headland and try to make the gap to get back in, or I can catch a wave and ride it down as far as I could and then sort of come in down on the other end of the reef. So I've caught that really big wave and run down sort of the coast, probably about 300 or 400 metres down, and as I'm just about to sort of pull in and go across the inside of the reef way down, I noticed there was a headland and a point that ran around, and I could sort of see waves breaking around the end. Yeah. So later on, I've decided that I was going to go for a paddle down that way, and that's when I sort of came across Padang and, ended up finding all those other little...
So you were one of the first to surf Padang, you reckon?
The first, as far as I know, it was just, we went down there, and then the year after that, I took people down there. We took we took Doris down there, Peter McCabe, Terry Richardson, Simon Anderson's brother, Dickie Hill came down and filmed down there. Bill Delaney, who did a movie called Free Ride.
That's one of my favourite surf movies of all time, Free Ride.
He came down there, and then the world knew about it. And now I go back there and look at it, and I just shake my head, and I should.
Well, it's pretty hard to get a wave at Padang.
I should have just kept my mouth shut.
I reckon they might have found it eventually, but a different kind of wave to Uluwatu too.
It is. It's short, and it wraps at the end, and it had a little funny reef at the end. It had like a hand that sort of came up with pinnacles in it, and I remember Doris going down under one and coming up in the gap between some of the other pinnacles. And what had happened is the wave had run down the reef, and as it had hit that little pinnacle of reef at the end, the hollowness had come down, and then it had opened up. So what you'd come down is you go and ride the tube, and you'd ride down right into the hollow until it was just like it was going to close out, and then it would just open up into like a big green room, and you just come through it and shoot out to the end. It was pretty special. I mean, that time, obviously, the guys like Boyum and Lopez were going over to G-Land and finding it, but I went, when waves are good in front of you, why go chasing waves when you've got perfect waves in front of you? It's like, why go to tea tree when you've got first point, working perfectly?
Well, that's like I surfed indicators at Raglan, and I've ended up talking to one of the locals there, and I got in with the locals, so I was in the top 5. So they go, why'd you surf the other bay? I said, no, I was in with the locals. I wasn't going anywhere. Yeah. That's when when you're on a good thing, stick to it, they used to say. Yeah. Mate, some of your other books here, you've got kids' books and the Spirit of Adventure. What... So you're a photographer as well. What started you? Because the first thing I saw that was you did the history of Queensland surfing in 1980 as well.
That's right. So all these generations that I've been through, from balsa and longboards, and then the evolution into shortboards and the modern era, and then the discovery of Bali, and then further on from that. And I've travelled quite a bit. I've been up in through Russia, and down.
There's waves in Russia?
No waves in Russia, but there's waves in Denmark, and the waves in Denmark are good, but they're wearing 5'4" wetsuits, and I think they'd look like the Michelin Man. But I built a few boards for guys up in Denmark, storm surf, and so what I do is I write these stories down, and the Bali stories are sort of, my time in Bali, and then the Spirit of Adventure was just a thing where I've got a bit of a spirit of adventure, that I like going and discovering places and going new places and going here and, snowboarding in Japan or, off down into Morocco or wherever it was at the time. And so I've always had my camera and my notebook, and I'd write these little things down, and as people talk about it, I'm just going, I remember that little story, and I'll write a bit down. So I've got 4 of these books that I've done now, which are just all different bits and pieces of different adventures of cars.
The photography's amazing.
Cars that I've sort of owned over the years and gone surfing with. And it's good too, because history gets distorted by people's views, and somebody goes, this happened there and that happened there, and I go, I think this happened here, and I know because I've taken photos of it that it helps my memory and clarifies, when things actually happen.
And photos don't really lie either. It is what it is in a photo, that's it.
That's it, yes. Yeah. So this is what the Spirit of Adventure books are all about. And there's, Samoa and all sorts of, places, skateboarding. This was an interesting one, that I was over in California with the... staying with the Campbell brothers, and I was helping Bill Delaney with his movie Free Ride, and these young kids one young kid in particular, they got evicted out of their house in Ventura and had to go out to this area where all the roads were dirt, so there was nowhere to skate. But they found an empty swimming pool, half filled with dirt, at the bottom of it, not half filled, but dirt in the bottom of it. And so they cleaned it all up and they started skating in the bottom of this, or skating in this pool. And so I went out there with Bill Delaney and he filmed a bit of the skating and free ride. And then I took a lot of these photos. But these guys here became the first pool skaters in the world.
Is that the Dogtown boys, was it?
No, this was way before the Dogtown boys. The Dogtown boys used to come up and skate this pool because it was the only pool where they were skating in drains and car parks and all of that type of stuff. Yeah. But the story of these guys, and there was one of the guys in there, Lonnie Toft, he had a skateboard that was 4 trucks on it, and he'd cross step and go up and take it up onto the edge of the pool and ride it up onto one wheel and then cross step and walk back down again.
Wow.
And they would treat the edge of the pool like the lip of a wave. And then the diving board was out there and they'd treat that like the lip coming over and they'd run around the edge of the tiles, and it was pretty innovative at the time.
And you got to take photos of all that.
Yeah, and the story. And I've been in touch with the guy, and he told me about how he got evicted out of the house, and they found this little pool, and just all the little bits and pieces. They all become part of, I guess, my life, and it's a bit of a story of my life.
It definitely is, mate. One other place I want to talk about, Hawaii. You got invited to Hawaii to events. You go in the Pipe Masters as well, is that correct? Or
first Australian to surf in the Pipe Masters. Scared me shitless.
Well, I've just surfed off the wall. That's enough for me, but yeah.
The pipe was pretty good at that time. It was about 8 to 10 feet. 6 of us got invited. So the 6 were Lopez came first, Rory Russell came second, Mike Armstrong came third, I came fourth, Jeff Hackman came fifth. Another guy, I can't remember what his name was, might have been Crawford or somebody else, came sixth. Got $100 check.
$100. Pa Bender was way better, mate.
It was.
Yeah.
So and I surfed in the Smirnoff, got a 7th in the Smirnoff, got invited into the Duke and got that beautiful gold-plated trophy that was designed by the same guy that designed the Oscars. So it's like an Oscar
of surfing
with the board in the background. Still one of my, treasured trophies that I've got stuck away in a box somewhere.
How did you find Hawaii compared to everywhere else you travelled, mate?
Hawaii was intense. And what it was that every surfer from every area in the world came to Hawaii to build their reputation, to make their name. And it was like this intense spot of where everything was intense. And then at that time you had the Hawaiians were going Howleys. We hate the Howleys. And I remember arriving at the airport and this giant big Hawaiian guy, the moke, is just, huge. He's just gone, "You Aussie boys, just get back on your plane and go home." And I'm just going,
"Oh, hello, welcome to Hawaii."
Yeah, that's it. And anyway, we arrived out on the North Shore and it was absolutely huge. And pipeline was breaking. There was probably only, 3 or 4 people out there. I ended up going out and surfing Sunset. And then I went, well, I'm invited to surf in the Pipe Masters. I better go and surf pipe. I paddled out and went, okay, I'm here. I'm going to, find out what's going on. So I paddled, where all the crowd was, and I paddled inside all the crowd, took off on my first wave, went down, did my bottom turn. And so before I got to that point, I'd shaped a couple of boards to take to Hawaii. In Australia, we've been riding foils where the thickness was right up front. And the idea was the foil with the short board was that you'd push it into the water and the buoyancy would make the board pop up, so you'd go vertical.
Yeah.
And that was how we got our real vertical start in surfing there. So I've taken off at Pipeline, pushed the rail in, the rail's gone in, just gone straight back up the face, and then the tail let go, and I've slid backwards and down the face of the wave. The wave's come over and blown me out the end, and I've come out the end, and I was just a shattered mess. I couldn't believe what I was doing, so I never went back in there again. And what I found out later was that Lopez was riding boards that were more parallel railed and even thickness, and he'd take off behind, just go in, put his rail in, and run out nice and smooth. Yeah. So learning what boards worked there was a real education, but I found...
Fast education by the sound of it, mate.
Well, I had a session out there and I did make the bottom of one wave.
Oh, wow.
Just taking off, just losing it, just another one, losing it before leg ropes. So it became quite a big thing out there when you getting nailed all the time. We had one session out at Sunset, and the Hawaiians were really particular about surfing as a Hawaiian culture.
Yeah.
And yet everybody's coming in at times of the year to take over all the breaks and things. And Eddie Icow was out in the water, and we paddled out, and it was about probably a 10 to 12 foot day. Maybe some were a little bit bigger than that coming through. And there was Midget was sitting out over on the left-hand side of the peak. Eddie was sitting in the middle, and I went, I'm not going to get involved. I'm going to sit over on the inside a little bit. Anyway, this beautiful, set came through, and I started paddling up the face of the wave, and then there was another one bigger, and paddling and paddling and paddling, breaking through the top. And as I'm getting up through the top, Eddie's paddled over near me, and he's gone, this one's yours. And I looked at it, and it's just like capping. So I've turned around, paddled into it, free fell, lost my board, went all the way to the beach. It's a 200-metre swim.
Oh, yeah, it's a long way at it, Sunset. People don't realise it.
The rip.
Yeah.
I got my board, paddled back out again. Eddie sort of looked at me and gone, Anyway, I just gone, I'm going to sit over here, stay away from everything. Another giant set's come through, cleaned everybody up. So there's only three of us out in the water. Midget's still sitting out really wide. Eddie's sort of sitting in the middle, out wide, and I'm sitting over on the left, thinking I might get a left.
Right, camis.
Yeah, well, it runs over into sort of backyards.
Oh, the backyards there, yeah.
Over through there. Anyway, this perfect wave came through, and Eddie's paddled over near me, and I've just gone, oh, no, don't tell me he's going to put me into one of those things again. And this wave came through, and he's turned around, and he's gone, this one's yours. And it was like just the perfect wave. And so you pay your price, you pay the dues, you respect what the Hawaiian culture's all about, and you get acceptance. And it's like that where you go anywhere in surfing. If you respect the locals and you fit in and don't try to dominate and all of that, well, it'll work.
Mate, mate, respect. I think that's a lot about it. And I can tell you, mate, just talking to you, immense respect for you, mate, because, that you've achieved so much in a lifetime, and I think you've still got a few more things you want to do in this lifetime, mate.
A couple more lifetimes will cover it.
Yeah, I think so. Mate, thank you for coming on the Green Room. It's been amazing. And, what a legendary life you have led so far.
Terrific. It's been great. Thanks,
Cheers, Richard.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into the Green Room. Hey, folks, would you like to get your name in the Green Room podcast? Well, we are looking for sponsors, so if you want to get a sponsorship, check it out at Podfire. Lots of people can hear about your product on one of the best podcasts around the Green Room, so check it out, Podfire. Thanks for tuning into the Green Room. A big thank you to our guests for sharing their stories and insights, and Podfire for bringing this podcast to life. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the Green Room with your friends. We'll catch you next time for more conversations with the legends of surf and beyond. Until then, catch you in the waves.